Alright, so in this tutorial we're gonna go over setting up our render sequence. Alright, so let me close that. So from here, let's go to up here, this tab right here, render settings. Alright, first thing, under file output, file name prefix. Alright, so I'm gonna type in my name underscore the project name underscore project, okay, and then hit enter, and that automatically updated file name .exr. EXR is the industry standard for your rendered output images to be composited even further. Okay, so just EXR. If you want to know more about EXR, I would just do so. Google it, YouTube it to find out more information. Right now, I want to keep this tutorial short. So in here, leave this alone. Next thing, default use output transform. Make sure that this is set like that. By default, it should be, but in case, be careful. Just make sure that use output transform stays like that. Alright, next. By default, it's name.extension. We're gonna change this to name.number, or also known as hashtag .extension. The third one down. Now it changes. It updated my name, project name .0001 .exr. The 000, that's your frame padding. So for your image sequences, everything will be in order. Okay, so name.number.extension, frame padding 4, use output transform. Okay, frame range. I set mine from 1 to frame 25 because 25 is where it ends for me in terms of animation. It's short and quick. But I recommend maybe a frame or two after that, for the sake of After Effects. You're going to use like freeze frame in After Effects, but regardless, it's just good to have a couple of frames after, in my opinion. Then renderable camera. This is super important. So instead of perspective, we're going to use our render cam. Next thing, alpha channel mask. Usually this is set to on, and usually you want this to be on, but for our initial project, we're not getting into render layers. Okay, so we don't want that on, we want that off. We're going to render as is, because if I have that on, it's going to have a blank empty background due to the settings that we set up. But later on, we're going to turn this back on for when we have rendered layers for different assets. So overall, turn it off, and also have render cam on. Next, image size. So by default, it's at HD 540. We're going to set it to HD 1080. So that's your standard size. 1920 by 1080 for most modern screens today. Yeah, I mean your render times will increase, but you're just gonna want 1920 by 1080. You don't have to go crazy and go 4K or whatever. It's just not necessary. Just 1920 by 1080 and you're good to go. Okay, so that was our render settings. Hit close. Next, for your render sequence, you want to go do render, and at school you could do batch render. At school, you pop this open. Arnold does not have any specific batch render options. Use the render settings to change the options for batch rendering. Alright, so if I hit batch render, it's gonna, from what I know, it's gonna use all the available computers on this network to come together and render out each image. Okay. I'm at home and I don't have a network of computers, so I'm not gonna bother with that. But maybe in class I'll go over that. But what we'll do is render and set up batch render sequence. Alright, so the difference between, I think the difference is that render sequence, alright, under the render tab, make sure that your rendering menu is set. Okay, so render sequence, pop open the option window. Is that, let's say you're at school or at home, okay, and you don't want to hog up the, let's say you're at school, you don't want to hog up the network of computers. You want to, let's say you're going to render just off of your one computer at school, which this would be perfect. This render sequence off of this one computer is going to pump out the sequences. So we're going to go current camera, render cam. Make sure that's set. Then alternate output file location. I think by default it'll go to your designated images folder, but in case, always want to make sure. Alright, so documents, Maya projects. This is my designated project directory I made, and here's the images folder. Select, and here it is, just to confirm. And then you're gonna go render sequence and close, or you could do render sequence. So when you press this button, the render window will pop up and you'll see it rendering. Okay, just to verify. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You hit render. So that's the end of this tutorial. The next tutorial we'll be going over the final render settings for render quality, making sure that we get rid of noises, we get rid of anti-alias, stuff like that, and also what to expect in terms of the render times. And then down the line, I'm gonna make a tutorial on importing your EXR rendered images into After Effects for a final composite, or final, to render out as a movie. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial.